Are we witnessing the beginning of some transparency maybe in the Jeffrey Epstein case? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill Thursday authorizing the release of a cache of documents relating to the late financier and sexual deviant to a grand jury. Speaking at a press conference at the Palm Beach Police Department, DeSantis said Americans deserve to know who was involved in Epstein's sex trafficking operations. Let's watch.
We're now sitting here decades later, and you've had Epstein, and then Maxwell is actually in prison in Florida, and yet nothing else has ever happened. And to not have justice on this is something that has been a big black spot on our justice system. So the legislature, and why did that happen? Well, it happened because you had somebody that was very rich and well connected and was able to engineer an outcome that the average citizen would likely never have been able to do, and that's wrong.
The legislation gives a green light to publicly disclosing documents if the subject of the inquiry is dead, the inquiry involves a minor, the inquiry has been previously disclosed by a court order, and if the state attorney is notified of the revelations. The bill is set to go into effect July 1st. So DeSantis, I think this is a good move. He said nobody should be protected from facing justice due to their wealth or status, and those who harm children should be exposed and punished to the fullest extent of the law. Very agreeable statement from Ron DeSantis. I think the fact that the circuit judge denied the request to release the information, the documents from the grand jury until the law goes into effect in July is a bit ridiculous, but it's really difficult to sit back and watch judges protect the wealthiest people in the country for really no reason at all. Like, there's no reason why these documents shouldn't be released. They're going to likely redact any arguments between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. That's not information you get from the grand jury, but you do get the evidence, which the public has been demanding for quite some time.
Yeah, and this could potentially unveil the full client list. Previously, we got some documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell case released in January of this year, but we didn't get anything related to the client list. Instead, we got some of the previous accusations and reporting on this, which included the names of Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Richard Branson, Stephen Hawking. Bill Gates was mentioned because of an alleged affair that he had. Bill Clinton was named quite a bit because he was apparently trying to kill stories at Vanity Fair on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. But what this bill would do is give us access to a lot more information in regards to the allegations of the trafficking of minors, because the information that would be released is from that 2006 grand jury indictment. And the 2006 case was when the FBI actually investigated Jeffrey Epstein for a little over a year, I believe. They ended up compiling a report of 34 minors who were eligible for restitution, reporting about the actual investigation from Julie Brown in the Miami Herald. Later found that there were at least 80 victims. She was able to locate about 60 of them. And at the time, what ended up happening was, thanks to negotiations between Alex Acosta, who would later become Labor Secretary, and the famous Harvard lawyer Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Epstein ended up getting just an 18-month sentence and had to register as a sex offender and pay restitution to the victims, even though he was originally charged with very serious felonies regarding sexual misconduct with minors. Alex Acosta has said that the reason that he went through with this sweetheart plea deal is because he was told that Jeffrey Epstein was some sort of intelligence agent for the government and that it was over his head and he should leave it alone. So in addition to hearing about who the clients were for Jeffrey Epstein and who else was involved in the alleged trafficking of these minors on a very large scale, I hope that this also helps us get closer to why exactly he was let off the hook so many times. Who was he blackmailing? Who did he have information on? Who was he in cozy with? And who really stood to be the most damaged by the details of this indictment getting out to the general public?
Right. I think there's something that's lacking in our system of justice that was there at its inception, which is this deterrence factor that you'll be publicly shamed for your bad behavior. And it feels like there are some things that are still true of that time. We have members of the royal family being able to pay off people who are victims of crime so that they don't speak about them. You have the wealthiest people being protected by judges We know that on several occasions in recent years, there have been all kinds of schemes and agreements between judges and corporations, judges and wealthy people, for them to either, really enforce the law. In some cases, put people in prison that have no priors, who are minors, to keep up with the contracts that states have around the standard of labor, that they'll keep a certain amount of people in the prisons that are for-profit prisons. And if they don't meet that threshold, that then the state is on the hook to pay with public dollars the remaining amount that's owed to account for those losses. Just the idea of maintaining a certain population of prisoners and judges signing on to this is ridiculous. Of course, we know those judges were caught and they paid hefty fees, but just the fact that this is happening in the United States of America, that we have a justice system that favors the wealthy and works for the wealthy at the expense of everyday people. You have people in Palm Beach County saying that they held their kids really close. They're afraid. They have no idea who was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein. That's a really scary reality to live in. And I think, this bill is one step in the right direction, but it definitely is the case that if you can afford expensive lawyers and you can afford to pay certain fees, when you're wealthy, different laws apply to you.
Yeah, it's amazing to see the difference in the way the justice system works in regards to Jeffrey Epstein versus even just some recent cases over the past few years from the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland. We saw the example of the DOJ indicting these people who were allegedly on this spree to try to kidnap the Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. It turned out that most of the movement on that case was perpetrated by FBI informants who were working undercover. We've had a couple of pro-life activists arrested recently and charged with violating the FACE Act for protesting outside of abortion clinics, people who are basically just everyday Americans. The FBI has tried to go undercover in Catholic churches, according to a memo that was released last year or the year before out of the Richmond field office, where they talked about how Catholics could be susceptible to extremism and could become domestic extremists. And all of this just points to a justice system that is more interested in prosecuting everyday Americans for simply exercising their First Amendment rights versus actually holding real criminals accountable. I mean, how many times did the FBI drop the ball on both the Jeffrey Epstein and the Larry Nassar case, right? The Larry Nassar case involving him, he was a gymnast doctor, and he was apparently sexually violating all of these young gymnast girls. And then there's the Sackler family, right, with the opioid epidemic and how they managed to convince all of these doctors to prescribe pills that they claimed weren't addictive, paid doctors all kinds of money in kickbacks if they prescribed the pills, and they've faced no jail time. They've basically just had to pay some fines and haven't really had to even admit any wrongdoing. It's such a miscarriage of justice, and I applaud Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for taking one step in the right direction of trying to get the American people the information that they deserve about all of this. Apologies for going on a little bit of a tangent there, Jessica. We're going to have to leave it there. That's all the time that we have on Rising Friday. But please come back on Monday for more Robbie and Bree and the Rising that you know and love. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks, Jessica. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.